My name is Dr. Fred Bell, and I'll be the moderator for the 2 UFO panels. There'll be one today, and there's one on Monday, I believe, at 11 o'clock. And so what I'm going to do is have everybody on the panel introduce themselves, take 10 to 12 minutes, and then we'll open up for discussion. Okay, so I'd like to start here. You can introduce yourself and tell people what you do and everything.
Do you have to come?
No, you can sit there. You just have to share the microphone.
My name is Vladimir Terziski. I'm originally from Eastern Europe.
Right there. Right there.
I just got naturalized about 2 weeks ago. I have a background in physics and engineering and a deep interest in UFOs for the last probably 15 years. I've been investigating a lot of cases from Japan, Eastern, Western Europe, and the United States. I do believe that what Harbinson writes in his books Genesis and Inception about the Germans developing flying saucers is absolute truth. That the Germans had about, I've discovered so far 20 different working models of flying saucers, the most primitive of them powered by propeller-driven piston engines. Then they went through turbojet, pulse jet, ramjet, and rocket engines. I discovered several of his designs that had exo-atmospheric capabilities, which made me believe in rumors that the Germans landed on the moon before the end of World War II, and subsequent later landings by Russians and Americans in joint saucer flights behind the back of the Cold War discovered the swastika flags on the moon. Also I've discovered huge football field-sized dreadnoughts that the Germans built. The Schriever electromagnetic interplanetary disk that has sleeping compartments in it. Nobody builds a sleeping compartment in a vehicle that flies around the globe in 1 hour. And it gives me reason to believe that rumors that they landed on Mars, not only on the moon, during the war are true. Then in my research I've discovered information on Narciso Genovese's spin-off group from the Marconi research group that escaped from Italy at the end of the war, hid in the Andes in South America, built a saucer of a different kind, and landed on Mars in 1956. And I will be glad to show the book in my lecture and seminar. Finally, after all these suspicious analysis of mine, I look with different eyes at the Alternative 3 film, and I have a feeling that it is a real landing at the end of the film, and I'll be glad to show this film in my seminar. I have a feeling that it is a real landing on Mars by a joint craft. Maybe they're lying about the date. It's not 1962, but it's probably 1952. Joint saucer craft, Russian-American craft. And this is probably an engineered designer leak, as are many other leaks that we have seen in ufology. But Bob Emenegger's film UFOs, It Has Begun, has a 7-second segment of a UFO landing on Holloman Air Force Base. As far back as 1 week ago, he confirmed that this is a real footage. This is not a dramatization. Many other famous ufologists have been shown footage. Rumors are that Spielberg was shown such a footage in order to engineer the leak of information in his films Close Encounters of the Third Kind and E.T. To change the subject a little bit, I had very strange feelings when I was seeing the statue of Dzerzhinsky being toppled on that dreadful square in Moscow. And my funny feeling was, actually one step back before the statue of Dzerzhinsky. Ronald Reagan is probably the most famous president in Eastern Europe. The most beloved president in Eastern Europe, because he was able to summarize the bottom line, our empire with our, well, the left side of the Iron Curtain, with 2 words, the empire of evil. And by putting out this image to the whole world, he basically helped tremendously for this empire to crumble. Anyway, so talking about the evil empires and seeing the Terziski statue toppling down, I said, well, when would the statues here topple down? When would the files of the secret organizations be opened up? When would the gates of the underground archipelago of huge research cities, we're talking about cities complete with waterfalls and nuclear power stations, of course, and magnetic levitation trains that encompass the whole country, when would this empire be opened up? I have a feeling that anti-gravity is not the only line of secret research of the secret one world government that has been ruling the planet for all these years. Genetics is by far a more difficult nut to crack than time travel and teleportation. Now, according to Al Bielek, these are technologies that are 50 years old. Anti-gravity is a technology that is more than 50 years old. But genetics is really a tough nut to crack. So recently when I heard by a famous UFO researcher that he saw while working on his famous film, a footage in a military base about genetic experiments in German concentration camps. In this film, there were hybrids of humans and reptiles and all kinds of impossible combinations that cannot be done by surgery. The Germans had working crude knowledge of genetics. A Simon Wiesenthal guy saw the film, he wanted to see the film. In order to get it released, he threw on the floor 10 minutes into the film, and that was the end of the discussion. It is such a horrific film. My feeling is that genetic experiments have been the major field of research of the secret governments, including the German base on the South Pole. This is another byproduct of my research of German saucers. The secret South Polar base that the Germans did, and Admiral Byrd tried to discover and conquer with his expedition of '48. We discovered the official Navy documentary film in color about that expedition. Recent German developments in after the unification of Germany. There's a very interesting society in Vienna, the Thule Society, Thule, something like the German Illuminati Society. They published several fascinating documentary films. One of them was seen in Australia, Flying Saucers in Flight, German saucers 50 years old. And also the story of their polar base, South Polar base. After they beat the hell out of Admiral Byrd's flimsy aviation, the rumor goes that the Americans nuked the German base on the South Pole in probably '48, '49, but because these were deep underground installations, they were not much successful. My feeling, looking at the little grays with the often present tall Nordic guys behind them, I have an inescapable intuitive feeling that the little grays are the biological robots that inevitably every race that thinks that can outdo either evolution or the creator, depending on which side of the divider line you stand, that inevitably every race tries to, well, prove itself that it can do better, and in 50 or 500 years outdo evolution. The Pleiadians did it on the planet 200,000 years ago, and many other ET accounts give the same thing. My feeling is that the little grays are a good candidate for biological robots, for the first biological robots that were designed. The men in black were probably a combination of mechanical and biological part robot. Another interesting thing that has to the recent Fox television about Bob Lazar's revelation. Thank you very much.
My name is Norio Hayakawa, and I'm a regional director of an organization that's loosely knit organization called Civilian Intelligence Network, and I'm here this afternoon as a part of the panel, and I will be speaking at 5 o'clock in Plaza A about this topic of UFOs, the grand deception, and the coming New World Order. It's my conclusion that we're living in one of the most amazing periods of history. And I'm convinced, beyond the shadow of doubt, that some type of a paradigm shift in the very near future will occur for a purpose that is, I believe, some kind of, it's very ominous type of mind control system. I'm convinced that there is a definite international, what I call an international banking system, and possibly a force that's higher than that, that is going to stage some kind of a possibly counterfeit type extraterrestrial event in the very near future for some purpose. And I'll be talking about this more in detail. The reason I became interested in UFOs is because when I was in Japan in 1962, I saw some pictures of so-called flying saucers, and ever since I had a tremendous interest in getting to the bottom of this phenomenon. And I've never seen what I call a UFO for more than almost 30 years of my research, until on February 21st, 1990, when I had an opportunity to accompany a Nippon television network crew to as a very covert operations area, which already is known as Area 51 in Nevada. And that completely changed my outlook on this entire phenomenon. The reason I am organizing a loosely knit group such as Civilian Intelligence Network is to tell the public this is where we should go. I am not a ufologist, and I don't believe in calling myself a ufologist. I am only interested in telling the public where to go and see for themselves what's going on. There is something strange going on, no question about it, at Area 51 in Nevada. There is something strange going on in Southern California, around the aerospace industries that surrounds the Edwards Air Force Base, that area. There's something going on, and I think that as we go into the 90s, as we go into next year, I'm convinced that there's something that's taking place. The dramatic social, political, geopolitical phenomenon, the changes that's going on, including the first attempt to organize a Middle East peace conference, the tremendous meaning of the unification of Europe on December 31st of 1992. And all these events, swift change of events, is pointing to something. I believe in back of this phenomenon, there is some type of a manipulation of a belief system of the public. And this is where the UFO phenomenon, and I still call it a phenomenon, because I believe that there are two parts to this phenomenon. I believe there is a part that is still unexplained, but there are parts to this phenomenon that is physical, an attempt by some group that we can't see that is going to stage some event in order to realize what they plan as a new world order. And I'll be talking about this more in detail. We're presently conducting expeditions to these areas, Area 51, the aerospace connection areas in Lancaster, Helendale, and so on. This is where people are reporting, even right now, seeing some kind of a surveillance orbs. We'll be talking about it in the lecture at 5 o'clock. I'll be showing all kinds of pictures of these covert operations center. And this is basically what I want to say for right now, but if you have any questions, I'll be in this lecture at 5 o'clock in Plaza A, right next door. Thank you.
My name is Linda Howe. I'm a television producer. The most recent show I was responsible for was UFO report sightings on Fox in October. I graduated from Stanford in '68. made documentary films for 2 years when I was working on my master's degree and concentrated on science, medicine, and the environment. So it's been at least 20 years of a professional career in which I never encountered the UFO field at all in any way, shape, or form until the end of 1979, when I began trying to understand what was happening to animals, especially cattle, in the United States and other countries that were being found with strange bloodless excisions that had a certain kind of pattern to them and were called animal mutilations. The first documentary that I did in that area is called The Strange Harvest, and that was broadcast 10 years ago. Then in 1989, I felt that I had so many files and so much information about not only that subject, but that subject as it related to human abductions also, and my own experiences with the government in the 80s, that I did a book called An Alien Harvest, Further Evidence Linking Animal Mutilations and Human Abductions to Alien Life Forms. That led to my doing an hour for the Fox affiliate in Atlanta last year, 1 year ago, called Earth Mysteries, Alien Life Forms. And that is what led to the Fox Hour, which was broadcast last month. In all of these efforts, the challenge has been to try to deal with facts, not rumor and not speculation and not science fiction and not creative imaginings, but to deal with the facts of what is happening on the planet. And I think in my own mind that the most extraordinary thing that I can say concerning this whole investigation of what has become known as the UFO phenomenon is that after 11 years of having contact with it in a variety of ways that has included the investigation of the mutilations that lead to the human abductions, my own involvement with government sources, leaks from military and intelligence, that nothing is more clear. That every year goes by and more information pours forth, and it always seems like we are on the brink of some kind of a revelation or a breakthrough, and yet it gets more confusing. My own suggestion today would be to all of you to try to read material and look at the videotapes that are increasingly available having to do with firsthand eyewitness testimony, and try to separate yourself from the speculations and the rumors. And if you try to stick just with what is being reported, photographed from the crop circle phenomenon to the areas that I'm also investigating, I think that there is no question that there is considerable eyewitness testimony to something that's not human involved with the planet. But what it is and what it wants and what eventually is going to happen if this ever is finally a story that can be told publicly by governments, that I think is still a big question mark as we go into 1992. At 5:30 in Catalina B, I will be going into some detail on aspects of the crop circle phenomenon. I'm working on a new videotape about that mystery. I will also be going into some updates concerning the animal mutilation phenomenon, human abductions, and would look forward to seeing any of you there. And for those of you, I've had a lot of people say, how can I get your book and your videotapes? There are some in the bookstore here, and I also have up here for anybody who wants, you can get some information about them. So thank you, and I'm glad a lot of you saw the October 18th program. It was a sincere challenge, probably one of the bigger challenges of my life, to try to make sure that the program on Fox had integrity. It is difficult in Hollywood, let me tell you.
I just want to say one thing too, that Linda's documentary show on Fox, I've had 5 separate people actually call me and tell me that they felt that it was the first time that the UFO subject was handled other than tongue-in-cheek and being made fun of, and that it was the first time it was handled in a legitimate, responsible manner on a major network, and I think she deserves a lot of that. My name is Sean David Morton. I got into the UFO field actually when I was very young. My father was a fighter pilot in Korea. and later became what's known as an XTP, an experimental test pilot, and test flew the SR-71 Blackbird, the U-2 spy plane, actually worked at Area 51 in the mid-50s that Norio and I have become so enamored with, and our friend Gary Schultz, who's also in the audience here, who leads the secret saucer base expeditions. There he is. Hi, Gary. Nice to see you. And when I was, he was in the astronaut program for a while. He dropped out to become the public relations director for NASA, and later became vice president of TRW. I have, when I was a kid growing up, I grew up around the likes of Gordon Cooper, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Alan Shepard, and we would have these guys sitting around the dinner table saying, talking about the things that they had seen that day, or in a flight, or something that they, a top secret mission that they were flying and couldn't tell anyone about for fear of being brought up on what was known as a PA, a psychological aberration, where every time you reported a UFO, the astronauts would joke they'd stick tubes in every orifice of your body, that they would do drug tests and alcohol tests and take your wings away for 2 weeks and not allow you to fly, because basically they said, you can see them, but if you report them, you will be dealt with harshly. And very few of the astronauts who actually opened their mouths about these things ever made it into space or onto the moon. The two exceptions of this are publicly who came forward are my friend Gordon Cooper, who paneled a board on UFOs and basically laying out a policy for the United Nations on what would happen if we came in touch with extraterrestrial life, and Colonel James McDivitt, who died just recently, who took photographs of a UFO out of the window of the Gemini 7. My educational background, I went to the British University in Cairo for a year, I went to Stanford for a trimester, and I graduated from the University of Southern California with a Bachelor of Science in Organic Chemistry and a BA in Political Science. I was nominated for, I worked on the show Buck Rogers for a period of time as a story editor. I was nominated for an Emmy for a documentary that I co-wrote called Fair Play. It was about women's sports for public television. I worked for 2 years in the early 1980s trying to bring Star Trek back to television with Gene Roddenberry. And I think it's a great shame that he died just recently. It's a big blow to everyone. And recently I was the co-director and co-writer of a documentary that was produced by R&D Productions. Joe Randazzo, who's going to be on the panel on Monday. It was an 8.5-hour TV series that is not yet on TV. It's now currently something called the UFO Library, which is a group of tapes and videotapes and audio tapes of various abductions and contactees and scientists from around the world. We shot somewhere to the tune of 600 hours of videotape. We went everywhere. We went all across the United States, the East Coast, South America, all over Europe. I mean, somebody had a dog barked at a UFO. We went out and spoke to him. And so this compendium of information began to accumulate, where this is really one of the few times that I have found, thanks to Joe Randazzo actually, he took a major budget to travel all around the world and speak to every single one of these people in person. Currently what I'm working on now is with Bob Schott, who's going to be on the panel today, but I guess we just didn't have enough chairs for him. So it's a program, hopefully a television program which we're putting together the prospectus for, and we've got a team of experts that we're talking to. Vladimir is going to be one of our experts. Hopefully Norio and Gary will also be involved with it. And it's going to be a program which is in essence going to take you to the water's edge and then delve into the mysteries. We have a team of some of the best scientists in the world. We have ufologists, we have physicists, we have astronomers who are skilled with I can't even say the name of the machine. The fluoroscopy, there you go. It's basically we've got some of the team of the best experts in the world to stake out haunted houses, UFO areas, and different types of phenomena, everything from Bigfoot to the Loch Ness Monster, all around the world. And we're hoping to get this thing done by, or at least be in production by the spring. My primary interest in this has been Area 51. Just to give an anecdote about that, I went out to, I had never seen a UFO in my entire life. Here I traveled all around the world. I'd heard everybody talking about UFOs and talking about their experiences with them. And it was February 27th of just this last year when I took a reporter from the LA Times, photographer and a friend of mine, and we were out driving around in the snow and the rain out at Area 51 when suddenly we saw a light off in the desert, and we jumped out of the car and ran towards this thing. And I was jumping up and down. I was going crazy because we were less than probably 500 yards from this thing just moving completely baffling the laws of gravity. I'm jumping up and down going crazy, and my friend Jeff is saying, he's very lackadaisical about watching this thing. He said, well, I've been out here 5 times. I've seen this, I don't know how many times I've already seen this already. And I was going insane. Of course, we got too close to it because we got our faces burned and we got a nasty fever afterwards from being too close to this thing. But 51 is one of the premier places on the planet, I think, for the benefit of all of you who are in the CIA listening to this. One of the best places on the planet where you can actually go out and stand by a public road and watch these flying saucers test on a timetable basis, because they do seem to test in the wintertime every Wednesday nights between about, it's like clockwork, every 45 minutes. And you think I'm kidding, but I'm challenging any single one of you to come with myself or come with Gary or come to Norio and go stand by this place, and you will see something that just baffles the imagination. I was the first person to actually get videotape of the military base. A friend of mine actually sort of snuck into the borders, dug a hole, and hid in this trench for 2 days where we actually pointed these stink. Oh, I tell you. Actually got videotape of one of these ships landing at the base, which was used by, it's going to be used in an upcoming Japanese television special. And so that's my educational background. That's what I have to say. We've been all around the world talking to people, and that's sort of how I got into the field, was having an interest where when you have 2 godfathers who both walked on the moon, and they've been there and they've seen it, and they tell you something's going on, but they can't really talk to you about it. You get interested, you get curious, you want to know more, and that's how I got started in it. Bill?
Your little story there about being in the trenches reminds me of some of the adventures some UFO researchers undertake.
Oh, this is good fun.
Yeah, I've recently taken such an adventure myself. I got started in 1953, very early on, back in the days of Take Me to Your Leader, ufology. Yeah, it was a big joke back then.
Name, please. What's your name?
Bill Hamilton, okay.
Author of Cosmic Top Secret.
Cosmic Top
Cosmic Top Secret.
Right. Actual level of security classification too, Cosmic Top Secret. Okay, 1953, before any real education and higher education. But I was interested in amateur astronomy. My mother was reading me newspaper articles about airline pilots sighting mysterious flying discs, and I got very interested in the subject, and I knew there were 2 things I wanted in life. One was a telescope of sufficient power to see the craters on the moon, and the other was a book on UFOs. And very shortly, I got both of those things, and the first book I read was Donald Kehoe's books, Flying Saucers from Outer Space. But there was a spate of books coming out at that particular time written by people claiming to have onboard contact experiences with UFO operators. And since many of those people lived in California, I had an opportunity in those early years to become acquainted with these people, and many of them became what I considered to be very close friends. I dropped out of college in the 1960s. At that time, I was intending to become a parapsychologist, even though my principal interest was in physics, in physical phenomena. And I joined the United States Air Force, took some tests, and ended up in the United States Air Force Security Service, or Air Force Intelligence, if you will. It's really intelligence and not security that they were doing, so they used the word security to confuse you. We're all given cover stories. It was directly under the National Security Agency, which Stan Friedman claims very few people know about. However, there's a whole book on the NSA called The Puzzle Palace. I learned nothing new about UFOs while I was in security service. I wasn't exposed to any secret documents or anything like that, even though I had a top secret crypto clearance. It's all based on a need-to-know basis. I did read AFR 200-2 when I was in there and verified its existence. I now have a copy of that document. When I got out of the Air Force, I became interested in UFOs again. Used to go out to the desert, by the way, some of this kind of rubbed off from the early days of the contactees, and so I started with a tainted past, you see, because for about 3 years I became a contactee myself between the years 1957 and 1960. So the UFO phenomena is very real to me by direct experience. And I do consider it is a physical phenomena. It has sociological and psychological dimensions. In the 1970s, I joined the Mutual UFO Network. I became a field investigator. I got interested in abduction cases. I spent 4 years on my first abduction case. That was the case of Brian Scott. It was an absolutely astounding, very rich case. He was abducted 6 times. He had a lot of mysterious automatic writings and drawings that contained a lot of scientific information that I was interested in. A lot of it was very, very precise. There was a lot of recorded and witnessed phenomena going on around Brian Scott, including mysterious balls of light. After that case, I got interested in other abduction cases, but every now and then I heard reports of somebody who attended to the so-called crashed UFO. And I wanted to stay my distance from those particular cases. I was very, very interested in this, and I heard a lot of things, but I wanted to keep my distance because, well, after all, I did have a top secret clearance at one time, and I didn't want to mess in government affairs. That was what I thought in 1980. But by about 1984, I got deeply involved. In fact, it was about 1984 that I started learning about Area 51. And then about 1988, just to speed this up a little bit, you might say, well, it was late 87. I decided to move out to the high desert in the Antelope Valley, bought 10 acres out there. Little was I to know that I'd established myself on 10 acres, approximately 8 to 10 miles from a very secret installation up in the Tehachapi Mountains. And I started talking to locals around there, and they started telling me absolutely fantastic stories about what was going on around there. And I started investigating cases of missing time in the Antelope Valley region, and started hunting up people who could tell me more about this mysterious installation. And about that time, my interest broadened quite a bit when I hooked up with Bill Steinman, and he got me interested in a lot of other areas. And from Bill Steinman, I got to meet John Lear in 1988, went to talk to him, and things just really snowballed at that particular time. And I said, I'm not sure I like the particular direction I'm going in here, but maybe I'll know when to stop. Well, I know that wherever that sign was that says point of no return, well, that was way back. Somewhere. I'm over the cliff now. There is no turning back. Anyways, one thing led to another, and there's much to tell here, which I'm going to relate some information for the first time in my workshop tomorrow concerning what's going on in the underground facilities. There's many. This is the big, new, astounding discovery that I made in the 1980s, was the extensiveness of underground construction and its relation to secret government projects dealing with advanced technology, possibly, because I cannot prove this, that this advanced technology is imported technology, alien technology, okay? There's no doubt in my mind that we have an alien presence on this planet. There's less and less doubt all the time that this alien presence is interacting with some segments, inner core segments of the aerospace industry, various government sectors, and the military. One of the most significant stories which I've been pursuing right up to last weekend in an attempt to recover proof deals with a man who worked in one of these underground installations about 12 years ago in northern New Mexico. An installation that, by the way, is still operational and still expanding, according to this man, who has left the country, but has left a great deal of material behind him. I have corresponded with this particular man, and I've gotten a great deal of information which I am attempting to check out very carefully. Because I have inputs from many other sources that I've made contact with in the aerospace industry in the Lancaster area, because I hold monthly meetings out there, people who've worked at Edwards, people who've worked at Northrop, Rockwell, Lockheed, and McDonnell Douglas, and I've talked to a lot of these people, and they've told me about the underground facilities. They've told me about the alien presence in some cases. They're very, you can't push them. They only volunteer a certain amount of information, and that's it. But there seems to be a pattern to this. I recognize a correlation in the information, and I think it's highly significant. And I do think also, I do agree with parts of what others have said here. I think we're living in a very significant time, and I think that we can't, or whoever's holding the lid on this, whether it's people in the government or whether it's the aliens themselves, I don't think that lid can stay down forever. And every now and then a hole gets punched through the lid, so to speak, right? And this information comes through, and they can't plug all the holes. So that's why we're learning things, and then we're passing these things on to you. But I think what we know compared to what we don't know, I mean, it's only the tip of the iceberg. And we may not have a true picture of what's really going on. I think I'll end off here, and we'll go on to whatever questions and answers.
Some of you already know me, and some of you don't, as the moderator on this panel and the following one on Monday. My name is Dr. Fred Bell. I'm a former student of sciences. I started at the University of Michigan on government grants at a very early age. I was working about 9 years old on what was known later as the Philadelphia experiment. I went into the Air Force when I was 16 and couldn't wear a uniform for a little while because I shouldn't have been in there. And in the Air Force, I was in early warning radar for a number of years. When I left that, I went to work at NASA through Rockwell Corporation. I worked with the late Wernher von Braun on the spacecraft. Became a student of Tibetan masters after I left the aerospace industry. I was very disheartened with it when I realized that NASA was nothing more than a WPA project, because the real things were going on like in areas like Area 51, which I knew about in the 60s. And as a result of changing my education and my lifestyles, I became a Pleiadian contactee in 1971 and spent 19 years with the Samyasi and other Pleiadian groups developing and inaugurating what we call an extraterrestrial science that allows people to upward and grade their consciousness, because the environment that we live in has a tendency to destroy it. And having worked with the good guys, the Pleiadians, the science that we inaugurated is all over the world today. 4 years ago, I started with another contact group because the Pleiadians had explained to me that they could only work through man's emotions, and most of the channelings and contacts were very limited. The channelings are always secondary, meaning that somebody channels a Pleiadian. They informed me that they could not work directly or interfere with human events because it would cause a repercussion back into their karma, and they had only gotten rid of wars in their society a few thousands of years ago. So they would only influence us by educating us and helping us educate ourselves. Then I got in contact with a new group, which is a different form of group, which is highly oriented in a thing called holographics. And this is a group from Andromeda. And they began to teach me about holographic science. In the process of doing that, we used a lot of Pleiadian sound techniques, which we'll be demonstrating over the weekend. And we began to use some of the sounds into big bands, like, for example, the Moody Blues used some of the sounds. John Anderson from Yes, as a matter of fact, Patrick Moraz will be here this weekend from the Moody Blues, who's into the same sound systems now. We'll be demonstrating both of us at different times. And so the Andromedans really told me, and they began to give me political information and exposed me to a lot of strange situations. I have direct inputs now from the intelligence agencies, which I didn't have before, but I've always had my aerospace connections. And there's some amazing things going on right now, as there's a massive defection taking place at Area 51. The book that was written about me by Brad Steiger is called The Fellowship. It's available in bookstores. And the new book has just been released that Brad and I wrote. Goes into this. It's called The Promise. It's available at our booth if you want to see that. And I'll be doing a lecture in the Pacific Ballroom after this workshop, or I mean this panel that we're doing now. So this gives you a little bit of background about what I do. And what I would like to do now is to, now that you've met the entire panel here, is to share questions from the audience and have a little communication. Yes.
This is tremendously fascinating about extraterrestrial events and everything, but we do have a problem on Earth right now, and it's in this room, and it's tremendously hot in this room. I don't know if I'm the only one. So is there any way somebody could open the doors or call somebody from the hotel to come and turn on the air conditioning?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I can do about it. I'm aware too. I'm overheating too. I'm always overheating.
I feel my blood pressure.
Let's open the back doors over there and put the chair into the door.
Yeah, I'm totally aware that it's a little hot. It's always hot. Yes, you have a question?
Can anyone on the panel comment on the book that just came out by William Cooper called Behold a Pale Horse, with the allegations in that book?
Yeah, let Sean Morton do that.
About it. Where there,
Go ahead, repeat the question. Sean.
Oh, okay. Let me put this on here, I guess. Two things. I like Bill. He's a friend of mine. We've known each other for a while. Basically, to sum up a lot of what he says in the book and to point to his allegations and why I think that this field is important is that probably, and Bill probably feels this way too, after a great deal of consideration, and this is not a knee-jerk reaction and not an emotional reaction at all, but probably one of the most heinous criminals on the face of the earth right now is President of the United States. Because of a personal hatred for the man or because of any political views that I have, but he's single-handedly responsible for so many scandals that I'm surprised not only can the Democrats not find anybody to run against him, but he's single-handedly responsible for so many scandals, from the October surprise to BCCI to the whole UFO gate thing to all of this various technology to him handling the war on drugs, and then suddenly, the price of drugs drops 1,000% because he figured out a way to smuggle them into the United States. This is a lot of stuff that Bill Cooper is talking about, and I'm not exactly sure what we can do about it. I mean,
I was going to say, what can he do?
well, look at it this way. Here you've got JFK, who was going to smash the CIA and scatter it to the four winds and make his brother Bobby head of the CIA because they completely betrayed him to the Bay of Pigs. A couple of shots later, and 30 years down the road, they've got their own president in the White House. You've got Nixon, who constantly complained that the CIA was responsible for Watergate. You've got the CIA responsible for the October surprise, which took Jimmy Carter out of office. You've got Bush, in a rather shadowy way, a lot of fingers point at him in the Reagan assassination attempt in 1980. His brother Prescott and his son Neil had dinner with John Hinckley Sr. 2 nights before Reagan got popped. I mean, I'm not sure. And when Reagan asked for the demographics on John Hinckley, every single finger pointed back at Bush, who's just picking and grinning, saying, "It wasn't me." So, as far as Bill Cooper's accusations, and this is the one point that I wanted to make very briefly, the reason a lot of this is important, and a reason a lot of the technology is important, is take all the aliens out of it, take all the outer space stuff out of it. The point is that the government has the technology now to turn the Earth into a utopia so that we can all work 3 weeks out of the year and devote time to our lives and to our children, to our family, and to our friends, and they're not doing it. The point is that when you get gravity involved, anti-gravity is the one crux that's the difference between the horse and buggy and the space shuttle. Since 1945, the end of World War II, when we took the entire Nazi scientific establishment and re-implanted it here in the United States, we have not had a singular public vertical advancement. In other words, an advancement that goes up and out and makes everything else obsolete. Everything's just becoming bigger and better or smaller and faster, but it's the same damn technology. And when you take gravity or anti-gravity and you involve it, suddenly you're dealing with mass without having to worry about weight, which means you can have 7-year-old kids with Lego blocks building the Empire State Building because you don't have to worry about weight anymore. So you could float New York City into outer space. You could make bases on the moon. You can have stations around all around the Earth. And Timothy Leary makes a very good point where he says that human evolution is basically based on two things: pollution and overpopulation. That basically when it gets too smelly to live where people live, they move and they go somewhere else. And that's why we're migrating outwards into space. So we have the technology now to create a utopian society for everyone. And a decision was made very early on, as this technology was being developed, where they said, well, we can create a public utopia or a private utopia. And obviously, guess which one they chose. So that's why much of this information on why the UFO stuff is important, because any part of this, from the JFK assassination to the UFO thing to the CIA, if you study just one part of it, it's the microcosm of the macrocosm, because the same people are always involved and the same methods are always used. And that's why UFOs link into everything else. Yes, I do think we have a deal with certain aliens, but I also think that we're the ones that struck it with them. I mean, let me give you a scenario here. Let's say we've got like a silver fleet. Let's say Jean-Luc Picard is actually out there in his spaceship somewhere, and a gray alien ship gets shot down in Socorro, New Mexico, or actually Aztec, New Mexico, and the military has microwave technology to blow these things out of the sky. And they approach one of these gray alien boogies, and they said, we want technology. And the alien said, okay, we'll deal with you. We want autonomy. We want to be able to operate on your planet without anybody knowing. We want as many human beings and cows as we can eat and or experiment on. And the military said, deal. We want anti-gravity, interstellar navigation, electromagnetic drive. And so Jean-Luc Picard says, well, you can't do that. That's interfering in their culture. And they say, well, we play by all the rules. They approached us. They blew us out of the sky. They're the ones that made the deal. We're dealing with the highest technological civilization on the planet. So in my opinion, they're going by all the rules. We're just screwing ourselves.
I'd like to add one more line about Joe Cooper. Well, in the 30s in Germany, it wasn't very fashionable to talk about concentration camps, but just 10 years later, the map of Germany was literally littered with hundreds of red points of such fine establishments. In the 60s, in a similar vein, nobody in Russia talked about the Siberian camps. The wildest estimates among Moscow intellectuals was probably 10,000 people went through the camps. Then an unknown mathematics teacher from Siberian village, an ex-camp inmate, wrote a little-known book called One Day in the Life of One Denisovich. And this catalyzed the whole country. 1964, people from all over Russia started sending him personal files, photographs, family histories, recollections, how their whole families vanished in the camps. He probably collected an archive that would fill a sizable part of this room. And 10 years later, he published the 6 volumes of the Gulag Archipelago. The Gulag Archipelago. And this is probably one of the most monumental works of not only literary investigative journalism, but pure literature. In my opinion, he's the greatest living writer on this planet. Why he is avoided by the American establishment is another different history, but I see a parallel here between Bill Cooper and Solzhenitsyn, that Bill Cooper has catalyzed many researchers like myself. He was the last drop that, well, overfilled my bucket. I realized that if all these things, just a tenth of them are real, then, well, we should start digging in the public libraries, and I've discovered amazing things in public libraries. I have a film that I will show tomorrow, official NASA documentary film that shows the flag on the moon fluttering in the air, talking about hoaxes that the moon has no atmosphere. I've discovered in official Los Angeles museums, here in 2 museums, doctored pictures of the moon. One has something looks like a highway structure that is airbrushed in the picture next to it, that is a lot more magnified. In another one, one can see clouds going over one of the craters on the moon. In public museums, one needs only to get suspicious. I have a twin digital amateur, very nice VCR. I recorded a NASA film on the moon, and I started playing slowly and freezing frame by frame. And I discovered 4 instances of these pulsating UFOs going through the screen, the same one as we see in the film UFOs Are Real, the one that goes over that famous rock in New Mexico. The information is out there. People have to start digging up. Somebody dug up that congressional decision about allocating $10 million for AIDS, for the immunity-fighting virus. We are all here, we can do wonders. All we have to do is just unite.
You could send away to NASA for all these pictures that Vlad is talking about too. They're like $6 and they'll send you all the plates.
Do you want to say something?
Yeah. Can anyone on the panel let us know which day the S4 defector may be speaking and at whose lecture?
I don't think anybody knows.
No, we don't know yet.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. I'd like to know some information on a group we call the Inner Circle and how Dan Quayle, that he is a part of it. I know this for a fact. How he recruits people for the Inner Circle. What is the Inner Circle?
Which Inner Circle is what I'm. Depends on which one you want to talk about.
There's more than one.
Are you talking about MK Ultra, which is the CIA assassination bunch that uses the drugs that's a front for World Visions International? Is a front for?
They make the decisions for world affairs.
You talking about MJ12 or I'm not? There's a bunch of Inner Circles, and I'm not exactly sure.
Okay.
I'm not exactly sure which one you're
Foreign
talking about.
affairs. Inner Circle.
Hasn't every President Eisenhower known about the deal between our government and the aliens? And is there such a thing as a president that will go to the people about this?
Gosh, well, look at how many people have talked about it. And, you know, Jimmy Carter. When we have 3 presidents of the United States who've seen it themselves. Jimmy Carter in the Playboy interview in '76 said, "I've seen a UFO. I'll make it all available." Now he can't even be contacted. Won't even broach the subject. Ronald Reagan walked up to Steven Spielberg. Stanton Friedman tells the story. After a White House screening of E.T., shook his hand and said, "You're one of only 6 people in this room who know how true this story actually is." Their whole point is that the decision, I think, was made in Eisenhower, when the Eisenhower administration, where here we just conquered the world, and, you know, we're gods of the universe, and then suddenly these ships come down, and, you know, we're at square one again. You know, we're once again, we're babbling idiots, not knowing how the universe is set up. And they felt that by studying anthropology, whenever you have a higher culture that intersects with a lower technology, very much like the Europeans did with the American Indians, the lower technology is usually raped and enslaved by said higher culture. John Keel recommends that if aliens landed on the White House lawn, we should cook them and eat them. Because just to show them that we're so savage, I don't agree with that, but that we're so savage that we're not to be messed with. And it's, you know, and he points out an Indian tribe in Brazil, and that's exactly what they did to the Spanish. They said, "Yeah, we'll have you for dinner."
I have a question for Linda. Linda? Okay, the movie, motion picture movie, Alien Nation, they show a ship, okay, a film footage of a ship that looks pretty much like it's taken back in the 50s. Was that a particular film that pulled out of the archives, or was it actually something that was put together by technicians in Hollywood?
I have no idea. He was asking about a ship in Alien Nation, whether or not it was based on archival material or some imagination, and I don't know.
Okay. I'd like to ask whether anybody on the panel can make a comment on the whack and cut in-SWAT joint venture and how that relates to the underground bases and the technology being developed and Michael Raffaello, et cetera, et cetera.
You want to handle that one, Sean?
I guess.
Okay, repeat the question.
She wanted to know about the whack and slaw ins.
Whack and
I'll tell you one thing, and this is something that Fred and I had something to do with, along with Joe Randazzo and a couple of scientists. I'm not sure they want their names mentioned at this conference. Has anybody ever heard of the Dulce Archuleta Mesa? No. Are you familiar with Dulce? No. There's a place at the center, and Linda's done extensive work on the cattle mutilations around the Dulce Mesa. Dulce, New Mexico is a little town that's about 60 miles south of the Colorado border, near the town of Durango. It sits in the middle of the Archuleta Apache Indian Reservation, and for many, many years, the Apache Indians and a number of people who claim to have been abducted and experimented on claim to have been actually taken inside this mountain. There's a great deal of evidence for this. One of the things that we did that I felt was revolutionary in the UFO field is here we had a whole slew of these eyewitnesses who claimed, and the Apache Indians also, a number of them jumping up and down, pointing at this hill, saying that there's a base inside this mountain, that it had 17 levels in it. There was a scientist who escaped from the base or defected from the base named Thomas C. He came out with security cam videos of the actual alien breeding tanks, which I've seen. And it was in a Japanese film special because I think Nippon Television paid him something like $50,000 to actually use the footage. So there was a lot of evidence here, so we wanted to come up with something physical. Here's all these people jumping up and down pointing at this mountain. What we did, and this was partly due to Fred's technology, is we went up on this hill and we ultrasounded the mountain using the sound of a Pleiadian starship, which I'm not sure a lot of you have heard. You can hear Bill Herman has a tape of the Pleiadian starship, a booth. Dave Herman, I'm sorry.
I have an entire demonstration in my workshop on
Right,
Sunday.
that Fred's going to be doing. What we did is
Of all this
we
equipment.
ultrasounded the mesa, we ran the sounds through a Cray supercomputer, and we came up with a schematic of exactly what the mesa looked like with the jet tubes, with the tunnels to the surface, with the monorail system underneath, with what was running microwave energy, what was running electrical energy. We found that it was a titanium yttrium hull because of there's an equation that you can use as to how fast speed sound travels through certain types of material, which is odd because one of the things the astronauts told me about was that the moon is a huge titanium yttrium sphere that's covered with about 28 miles of space dust. And we found that out when the Apollo 13 retro rockets bounced off the moon, and the seismographs on 11 and 12 that were still on the lower half of the lunar module registered the sound. So we have physical proof of the bases. Oddly enough, a lot of evidence that I have shows that 10 days after we were there ultrasounding the mesa with that Pleiadian sound, the base was in fact evacuated on two major evacuations on the 28th of December and again on January 7th. So the bases are there. We also found two guys who were construction workers who claimed to have built the base in '54 as a huge nuclear dump facility, and then supposedly it was never used. So there is physical proof of this stuff. They've been doing it for many, many years. There's underground complexes that crisscross all of the United States, from monorail systems to bases to entire cities. Yeah, he has some information on this too.
Excuse me, I just want to make a couple of corrections here. Thomas C. was not a scientist. He was a photographic specialist in charge of security cameras at the installation. Okay, and the footage has not been released. The footage is still buried. I've been working on a project to recover that particular footage. It's only about 8 to 12 minutes long. It's in black and white and does not show the cylinder.
I'll show you a piece of it.
It's recreated.
No, it's been recreated by the Japanese.
Oh,
Yeah. That's not the actual footage. I know this for a fact. However, now, I have no proof that this particular base is there. I visited Dulce back in 1988. However, this man has provided me with extensive information on, which seems very detailed, on how this base is constructed, what the levels are between the layers. It's about 200 feet down below the surface is where the ceiling of the top level starts, and it goes down about 7 levels. And there's a whole story behind this that I will get into in my particular workshop, but I just want to come back very briefly to this question because we kind of went off on a tangent about the Inslaw and Wackenhut security. And I have just recently heard about an interview that was done with Riconosciuto, and he was talking about the mysterious helicopter crash in which 3 Wackenhut security people were killed in this crash up on the Nevada test site. This was near the atomic test site there. And his claim is that these were renegades, that they had collected documentation on what was going on in the underground facilities there. And by the way, I have talked to a man, and I know a man who's been to a literal underground city about 40 miles deep into the test site.
How many miles?
40 miles?
40 miles into the test site, but not down. Okay. Let me clarify that. Is where it was located. But he claims that it was shot down because these men were trying to take documents out of there in order to reveal, I guess, what is going on, which Michael said was the worst. So whatever that may mean. So I think you were referring to that, and upon further questioning, it was astounding to me that he mentioned that he had participated in projects, apparently, that dealt with advanced propulsion systems and had seen the flying saucers, but was shielded from any direct contact with the extraterrestrial presence there. So I just wanted to add that.
Hi, I'm John Lear. I'm a captain for a major cargo carrier. Please join me with Linda Moulton Howe on One-on-One.
My name is Bill Hamilton. I am a UFO researcher and investigator. I investigate UFO sightings, abduction cases, crash retrieval events, and underground activity. You can see me on tape with Linda Moulton Howe on One-on-One.
Yeah, for Linda Howe, can you give a brief overview of what's been going on the crop circles in England? And I also heard that the Japanese have been experiencing quite a few, over 100, I think, this summer in Japan.
It's a little awkward because I'm going to be going into this in some depth at 5:30. I guess more briefly, to start with the media headlines this fall. Doug and Dave are not responsible for
Take off,
the worldwide crop circle phenomenon.
Two guys.
It's to me that perhaps one of the most interesting things that happened this fall was that story because of the comment on the media. I'm not sure anymore who makes a decision about what gets covered and what doesn't get covered. But there does seem to be a very narrow focus when it gets into this area of UFO phenomenon that's been illustrated for me personally and several times in the past few years. But going to Doug and Dave, in that particular instance, it was as if CBS, NBC, ABC, CNN, PBS, Fox, and others would run with a headline on the National Enquirer or the Star or the Globe on the evening news. That is exactly what this was comparable to, because the story was printed in a rag in England. And what is also interesting is that the networks chose to take that particular videotaped interview that one particular reporter did and say this was a demonstration of how all of the phenomenon had been done without any in any interviews with any of the scientists that ranged from a physicist to an agronomist to seed experts and so forth, there was no counter question on the news, if you will recall. It was just, it's been answered. The next day at a press conference in London, because I was in touch with George Wingfield and Busty Taylor and Montague Keene, who's an agriculture guy, and a whole bunch of people the next day, at a press conference when they asked about why had they made the Mandelbrot set, they asked, what are you talking about? When they said, how did you make the large triangle at Marbury Castle? They said, we didn't make that. When they talked about other specific pictograms that people had studied, those two men were, we didn't make that, we didn't make that, we didn't make that. And eventually, in England the next day, they had reduced their comments to saying that they were responsible for 20 or 30 circles, and some of the pictograms where they said they had put their initials next to, making a D and a D. Well, in 1990, there were an estimated over 1,000 that had been made in Europe, and there were 11 countries involved in 1990. This year, there were not as many pictograms, and in terms of the worldwide phenomenon, it was not as extensive as the year before, for whatever reasons, but it was in Canada, it was in the United States. There were reports in Scotland and in France and in Russia and in some other countries. And I think myself that the most important thing that's happening is the science. I'm working right now with a biophysicist who has gotten cross-sections from some of the affected crops from at least 6 of the pictograms this summer. He has found some extraordinary findings having to do with increased alpha radiation in the stems. It is raising a very interesting question to the biophysicists and others about what produced this particular increase in radiation. I will be talking a lot about this in the workshop at 5:30, and I will be showing some slides. I'm going to be doing more on this in the videotape I'm working on, but this is perhaps a long way of saying that the crop phenomenon should be paid attention to. I don't know whether there was some concerted strategy to diffuse public attention on this mystery with the Doug and Dave story. I have seen those men on camera, and they do say, and they are very jovial, very nice guys that are a little late 50s and 60s, that 13 years ago they decided to do this as a lark, and they demonstrated their machine. But keep in mind that most of what they claim to have done was in one particular county. In Wiltshire County, which is where Stonehenge and Silbury Hill and Glastonbury and Avebury are, they did not claim to have made many of the pictograms there. And when this summer comes, the problem's going to be that there's going to be probably more people who are going to want to have the quote-unquote fun of Doug and Dave in terms of making something in the crop fields. But I will leave you with this. I talked with a National Geographic producer who was there on June 16th in the afternoon with a crew for an hour documentary that will air in December on the Explorer TV series about the crop phenomenon. And he knows that the farmer was there to 10 o'clock that evening, and it was a perfectly normal field. And at 6 o'clock in the morning, when the farmer got back to the field, here was this enormous 410-foot triangle with, as one mathematician said, it's an extremely interesting geometry lesson. And the producer told me that up until that time, he really wasn't sure whether they were dealing with a sociological phenomenon or not, until he saw this. And then he said it was one of the eeriest things that he had ever seen. Whatever made this gigantic geometry lesson in that crop did so between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. Total darkness. And that night, in that area, they had several reports of odd, silent lights in the sky over that particular field. That doesn't prove that quote-unquote UFOs are responsible. But as a physicist in Glasgow, Scotland said, he is convinced that we are dealing with another advanced intelligence.
Now, Vladimir wanted to make a comment too to that question.
Billy Maher in 75 in one of his books, because he had similar crop circles but in threes, because the Pleiadian beam shift, when it extracts the legs, it has 3 pods on down at the end of the legs that when they touch the grass, they create these smaller circles. He says that basically the anti-gravity field of the saucer overcomes the terrestrial field and even leaves a residual, let's call it magnetization, of the topsoil that lasts for several months, and the grass or the crops are duped into thinking, the individual plants, that the vertical direction is in this way. This is exactly the intensity of the anti-gravity field. The way we can see the invisible, I mean, well, basically a fingerprint on a dusty surface or a metal filings over a magnetic field would make the invisible visible for us. In the same way, these individual plants make the invisible field visible. Something else very interesting about this push-pull or tug-of-war between the proponents and skeptics in the field of ufology, in that book published by Wendell Stevens, UFO Contact with Ayarga, the ETs themselves give a very good metaphor about the complex phenomena of opening a race to the realization that they are not the only thinking beings in the universe. They say that this is the biggest cultural, philosophical, political, religious shock that this society has to undergo. So it has to be handled very carefully, not to arrive at a runaway chain reaction. It has to be a sustained reaction, and they're using the metaphor of a nuclear reactor. The proponents of ufology and the skeptics of ufology are basically the nuclear fuel and the control rods. If the reaction gets too fast, the control rods are lower. There is a D&D debunking story appearing to cool down the passions. Then when the passion dies, when the reaction dies too much, there would be another series of crop circles appearing. So all the Philip classes, as much as they're hated by ufologists, they serve a social good by preventing an anomic social meltdown. And by slowing this process.
One other thing, when I've been to England twice this year, we've been studying the phenomenon also, and a friend of mine, his name is David Tickle, took a very high-powered Sony camera with him over there recently, and we were filming in Glastonbury, at the, not Glastonbury, but the Stonehenge, and Sean was editing the film, which we're coming out with a video now, one that we put together from our group, and we're filming in broad daylight what is called an amber-gamber, which is what they call, the English call it that. It's a hovering, some kind of disc. And in the edit process, we found that there were 4 or 5 other ships. This seemed to be the main controlling ship that were going in and out of frame. And then some further editing, because it's high quality, we suddenly found that there were some small 3-foot objects that were coming from a nearby hillside, and they were in the grass, making circles in the grass in broad daylight, and we have that on video. The Japanese are going to be doing an analysis on it, but it might be the phenomenon of the crop circles actually being made. We may have some of the first recorded footage of that. Okay, now, you got a question?
Okay, I have 2. Mr. Bell, have you been privileged to any information that would coincide with Norio's projection of something going to happen in a few years? Also, my second point, if anybody on the panel could elaborate on the hollow earth theory.
Well, the 2 questions. One, can I correlate with Norio? Yes, the Andromedans have said that they're going to be well known by the world by 1995. That's what I've been told. And the way things are going this year, from what I've seen, I can say that the timetable is pretty intense. As far as the hollow earth theory, maybe somebody else could make a comment on that.
I have to admit that this is the biggest difficulty I had with any of the crazy stories. I tend to take everything, well, for granted. My long study of ufology told me that what one would read in a standard tabloid environment is more of an understatement of ufology than an overstatement compared to what the articles, let's say, in Flying Saucer Review Journal, which is a way more serious, but one of the best UFO journals in the world. The tabloid reality is bizarre and strange only for people that have extinguished the flicker of curiosity in their hearts or simply haven't done their homework well. I asked a friend of mine who deals with the paranormal and spirit phenomena. I know nothing about them. He spent all his life, and he's a very strong psychic, but well, he has to eat pork constantly to stop getting out of his body at any time of the day. And he bottom lined it in one sentence for me. Everything you've read about paranormal phenomena in the tabloids is true, and even much more than that. I won't say anything more. So, still I had a hard time believing in the hollow earth theory, especially if it is taken literally that it is an opening in our dimension. However, if it is in a different dimension on frequency range, I mean, we can have basically any reality we want. But one confirmation, or at least some light in the tunnel, I found in the book Waste, published in 1882, which is the Jehovian hierarchical, well, heavens, concentric heavens, something like the Russian dolls that go one into the other, but circular, around our planet, that have similar openings at particular places where their spaceships can go in and out. This is a reality in higher frequency ranges, so when we fly through that, it's air for us or space, and we won't see or feel anything. But in higher frequency ranges, they have grass, water, chemical elements, hard, I mean, as hard, solid reality as it is for us here. This is what the book claims, but it is a nice lead for anyone who would like to take a more serious look into the whole earth.
Yeah, Nori, you want to make a comment?
I just want to make one comment. Just because I've been to Area 51 many times, just because I've been to the aerospace, air covert areas, just because I've been studying this phenomenon for many years, doesn't necessarily mean that I completely support the so-called ET or extraterrestrial hypothesis. And my position is very, very similar to Dr. Jack of LA, and we cannot presuppose anything right now. I'll be talking about the control of the belief system of a public for a specific purpose. Now, Mr. Bill Cooper changed his position a couple of years ago, but especially lately, and he does not say that he necessarily believes that there are any alien, so-called aliens at all. Now, I just want to make one thing clear. We may just be experiencing some of the most amazing information, disinformation, manipulation, belief system control of the public, and this is where it's at right now.
I just want to try to come down on what some people do testify that they have seen, and that is that there are ranchers and farmers who over the years have seen what are described as non-human creatures that fall into that 3.5 to 4 foot tall, grayish green skinned, large black-eyed category of either carrying an animal that's later found mutilated or some other version on that, or seeing them go up in a beam of light. So even though I would also support the caution that there is a tremendous amount of manipulation going on both by the alien intelligence and governments, keeping us at an arm's length distance from truth. I think you also have to pay very clear attention to eyewitness testimony, and when it does involve what appears to be solid creatures of some sort with animals, I think that we have to pay attention to that.
I think it's also kind of amusing that every McDonald's all throughout the world has ET in it. He's back, he's hungry.
A very important line here about the technologies used in a typical little gray abduction scenario. One of the last things that I thought would be impossible for our terrestrial science to reproduce would be the throughportation, moving of one object to another without visible harm for any one of them, including human beings. And through the revelations of Al Bielek, I realized that basically this is a technology that is at least 50 years old. The rest of the technologies, most of them I have found existing in Nazi Germany before even the war ended. The Germans had electronic stun guns that would paralyze the victim, exactly a state similar to just before the abduction. They probably discovered these elevator or tractor beams that would pull out a crate of something or an abduction victim up to a ship using the anti-gravity field of the ship itself. Basically, every single of the one of the technologies that are used in a standard abduction scenario are more than 10 years old. Some of them are 50, 60 years old. So we have, of course, to take very seriously the details of observations of people that were there at the happening, but at the same time, we have to do the research in the libraries and to see what was done so many years ago, and the information is out there in the library of UCLA. I have found astonishing material.
You had a question?
Yeah, what happened to the, isn't it true that there were some surviving aliens out of the Mexico crash, and they had them alive for 2 or 3 years, and they called in a botanist to feed him some kind of...
Ollie, but once again, it's maybe no one really knows. Linda's probably best to answer.
In '83 at Kirtland, I was shown a briefing paper, at least described, or had a title for the President of the United States, that described the retrieval of several discs and bodies, both dead and alive, from the 40s into the early 50s. Since that time, in '83, having read that particular paper, Stanton Friedman and I, and John Carpenter and Don Berliner and some others, we have been also working on a case in which it appears that there was a second crash in parallel at the same time with the now famous Roswell 1947 crash. And in this other, we have a man named Gerald Anderson who was there with his family as a young boy, who remembers their coming across the silver disc with bodies, 4 of them, one very much alive. And if that is in fact true, and there appears to be at least a lot of memory on people who knew relatives, that the father had talked about a disc and bodies, and that a man named Barney Barnett, who worked for the U.S. Soil Conservation Service, and worked up and down between Socorro and Magdalena, and that he also had told people before he died that he had come across a full disc with bodies. That if you take all of those witnesses, and now a current living man, who I will also be talking about in the workshop and showing some drawings that have been done with people like you work with a police sketch artist of what he recalls, then it means that as early as July of '47, there was at least one live body that the government was dealing with, and Stan and I and others think it was taken to Los Alamos with those bodies, and the Corona side of the crash was handled at the Roswell Army Air Force Base and was distributed to other parts of the country. So I think there's increasing evidence, even in firsthand, that we have had craft and bodies.
Another interesting line here is that persistent reports about genetic engineering, especially cloning, claim that not only animals up to a given level of the evolutionary tree have been cloned, but basically human beings have been cloned, and all it takes is basically one cell from the fingertip of a human being to produce a perfectly identical genetic clone. Probably this technology was tried on some of the aliens, some crashed or just borrowed aliens. Give me a little bit of your skin, we would like to clone and study your race. Many races would do that. And so if there is a cloning technology that is so much advanced, then the question is, could it be possible for a secret government to produce a race of biological robots, totally biological robots? And another interesting question here is that a government that possesses time travel, as Albila claims that they did for 50 years, it's very easy for them to plant any evidence in any time zone they wish. They can take something back 10 years or 100 years back in time, plant it there, and then of course it would be discovered. Billy Meyer did for educational purposes such an experiment. He left an electric torchlight, and then later, several months later, went to the archives of the same French village, and sure in the archives there was a mentioning of strange lights into that farmer's house. So what we see in Back to the Future, it is not a fictional film. According to Al Bielek, all these films about time travel are a little engineered campaign of educating the public of the possibility of time travel. Time is as soft and easy to bend as are the electrical signals on our oscilloscope. We can do with it whatever we want. So it is hard to push in a corner a government that can plant evidence or remove evidence through the means of time travel.
You have a question over here?
Yeah, the question I had is, there's all this awesome footage that we hear about. Why is it never shown on television? And why do the Japanese seem to get it? Like you, Linda, you have an in at Fox and you had this awesome program, whatever you're talking about. I liked it. But it's like it was so lacking in like really good, like you know, like we're having a conversation here. Is there a reason for that? Is it like they won't?
Because no one has it. The Japanese, contrary to the statement here, that film that the Japanese did recreates. I know Jim Yowie and I know the people at Nippon, and they're always recreating scenes based on testimony. It's like a docudrama. It's like Unsolved Mysteries, where they recreate that has nothing to do with the reality. I have had descriptions from people about several hundred, if not thousands, of feet of film that have been taken of alleged aliens in craft and landing that the government is supposed to have in some underground facility. But until the government chooses to release it and show it, that doesn't mean any of us have any access to it. It's all, this is why when I first said it is so important to separate fact from rumor and speculation. This is why the government can manipulate the media and the public so easily. People tend to want to run with anything that sounds sort of sensational or interesting without bothering to ask, is this based in any kind of fact?
Well, Fred and Sean said they have things like, why can't you guys work together, talk to the people at Fox and say, hey, we got some really snappy stuff, and yeah, it was real.
I'll give you an example of that. Fred and I are putting some things together to make a home video. Two things. First off, the Japanese pay top dollar for a lot of this stuff, you know. And if I'm contacted, I was just contacted by a station in San Diego. They said, gee, we hear you got some great footage. And I said, yeah. I said, well, give it to us. And I said, you know, it took me a lot of money, it took me a lot of time, you know, and it's just dumb luck to be able to do this. Right. So, you know, and another example is Bill Cooper. Bill's got a lot of footage that he uses, but he just doesn't want to give it away because a lot of people make, you know, I mean, we occasionally make some money on the side doing this. You know, it's not all altruistic, as much as we like to believe it. And the Japanese do come in and they say, look, we'll pay you cash on the barrel for what you got. And any network anywhere in the world says, we expect you to just, or in the United States anyway, just give it to us because we're NBC or CBS or whatever.
Well, what about the Fox was an actual show, though, where I guess that was not a typical just for free type of thing?
I can tell you that I personally screened literally hours and hours and hours of footage that we got from archival areas all over the world. I've looked at everything that's out there. If anybody has videotape up front, close up, of something that is identifiable as a silver craft outside of the odd moving vehicle that Ed Walters videotaped, the very controversial Billy Meyer 8mm film, I would like to see it. There is nothing that I know of that anyone has that's accessible that meets the criteria of the conversation up here, which is, I think, is far-ranging and imaginative, and is largely is on rumor and speculation and not fact. The government, I think, does have a lot of film and a lot of videotape, but we don't have access to it. Now, on behalf of people who are out there with camcorders and cameras and are taking a lot of current videotape in Gulf Breeze and other parts of not only this country but the world, they're getting odd things on videotape, but they all have the same problem. A camcorder at night does not have the resolution, nor can it hold what people are seeing with their eye in the sky. It largely is being videotaped, and everyone has the same problem, whether it's the Japanese, NBC, or anyone else. You need to be able to experiment with filters, and when something's happening in real time, you don't have any ability to be changing around filters because everyone wants to tape what's there. So you largely get something that is either bright white, magnesium white, maybe with a little definition. In Gulf Breeze, they are now getting what looks almost like a string of pearls around a blob of light. And in some cases, when it does go to red, on some of the still cameras, they have been able to hold some of the red in the emulsion, but not on the camcorders. All of the camcorder footage is white. It is a white glaring light. So when it comes down to the reality of what is it that real people have actually photographed or videotaped in the sky, it is few and far between. Anything that you could present and say, this is proof of another intelligence from someplace else that's in some kind of a craft that is doing unknown things outside of eyewitness testimony. And there are thousands of people worldwide who have eyewitness testimony, but no one has what would be called hard evidence to back it up.
Thank you.
Regarding the Japanese experiments, it's an interesting phenomenon because Japan is a superpower, and although they are members of the Trilateral Commission, obviously they don't follow the line, the official party line from Washington as closely as some of the other allies would do. I spent 6 years studying in Japan, and I saw a lot of UFO documentaries there. They showed a brilliant 2-hour documentary film on Billy Meyer that a large group of Japanese physicists and scientists analyzed and explained in 1980 on primetime television, and 30 million people saw that. Here, 10 years later, Billy Meyer is still debunked on the MUFON symposium meetings. His pictures are the first on the board with fake photographs. So there are subtle differences in the national politics regarding UFOs, and if one is able to tap it through different languages to these sources, I mean, a lot of information can be collected, as for example these pictures here. This is a picture of a 25-kilometer long mothership hanging or parked next to the Martian moon Phobos. The story appeared on hard copy, but they did not have the picture at the time. Marina Popovic will be talking about this in her seminar tonight. And this is probably one of the first pictures of a crashed UFO that was found high up in the Caucasus Mountains by some mushroom pickers and mysteriously disappeared 2 weeks later. Through the chaos of perestroika in Russia, I think that the KGB has a lot of other things more important to worry than chasing down UFO reporters that smuggle out pictures to the West. So there are ways to crack the secrecy.
We're running out of time now. It's got to go to other lectures. We're going to have another UFO panel on Monday, and that will be at 11 o'clock in the Pacific Ballroom. We're going to have a big conference in Egypt, and I've got some flyers here if anybody's interested of a UFO conference at the Great Pyramid in January. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Norio Hayakawa, Regional Director of Civilian Intelligence Network. I've investigated the UFO phenomena for more than 30 years, and for the first time, I'll be presenting what is going on in Area 51, a top-secret military scientific installation in Nevada, and also what is going on in Southern California, the covert operations facilities conducted by the Aerospace Industry Connection. There's something going on even right now. Some things are being test flown over there. I'll be talking about the latest document to prove that this is so. You will see me in a whole life video series. Thank you very much.
For decades, the subject of UFOs has been shrouded in secrecy and ridicule and disinformation. But today, it's too important to be kept under wraps. And so we've gone one-on-one with some of the top researchers in America to bring you the real story of UFOs and the alien presence. Join us one-on-one as we talk with the people who have uncovered the facts of UFOs and brought them to you. One-on-one, information too hot for the networks, information you need to know. Join us for One-on-One.
This has been a presentation of Lightworks Audio and Video.
Hello, my name is Sherry Stark. I'm the co-publisher of UFO Magazine, the first journalistic forum for theories and reports about UFOs. When Vicki Cooper and I started the magazine in 1986, there was very little, if any, serious reporting on the subject. Basically, it was your tabloid coverage or occasionally a cursory or a comic relief mention in the mainstream press. Since that time, there has been growing public interest in the subject, starting with a couple of best-selling books, and there have been documentaries, and there have been talk show guests, and a lot of interest and a lot of types of information out there about the subject. But in some senses, it's even more confusing because there are so many different kinds of information that are subjective that the general public often is turned off to the subject as a whole. And what we're trying to do with the magazine is present the best information scientifically that is being shown, the best research, and present it in a way that the general public can access it and have a source that they can trust, that we don't have any vested interest or particular theories that we're pushing in the field. We also have like a guide to the best books that are out, the best research that's been released recently, the best cases. We also have opinion pieces, sometimes with theories from different disciplines that might help to explain from a different angle what might be going on. If you'd like to find out more about the magazine, you can send $5.45 for a sample issue, or you can subscribe for $21 for the year. And you send it to UFO Magazine, P.O. Box 1053A, Sunland, California, 91041. And if you'd like to call and get more information, it's 818-951-1250. Thank you.